The 1981 New York Rangers were a team in transition. They're probably one of the most underrated squads of the decade because what they did in the playoffs after a mediocre regular season and with Espo leaving, you thought, hey, they're not going to make the playoffs. He almost played Montreal first round. It was a coin flip because he tied with Edmonton in the standings. Edmonton played Montreal. Gretzky knocked him off, but they eventually did well, winning 2 postseasons. Now, the big problem with New York that year, they were giving up a lot of goals, 317, in fact, almost 4 goals a game. They finished 4th in the Patrick Division with 74 points, enough to earn the berth in the playoffs. They bet the Kings in St. Louis, not their normal rivals, in the first 2 rounds to reach the semis, where they were swept by the Islanders in a 4-game sweep. And I think what really hurt them was the overall goaltending. Now, guided by the great Fred Shero, and Craig Patrick, and of course Craig Patrick took over later on. Walkachuk was still there, and Madison Square Garden, yes, the Rangers played there. You wouldn't know because there's usually no logo at center ice. Big crowds that year at 17,293. Eddie Johnston and Anders Hedberg each had 30 goals that year. Ronnie Greshner, 41 assists. Hedberg had 70 points. Barry Beck, the big enforcer over from Colorado, 231. Future Jet and Canadian Doug Sotard had 16 wins. And of course, a young Steve Weeks was there. Now, Shero, citing a drinking problem, chose to resign as coach. Craig Patrick, the Rangers' DAV, replaced him. Patrick gave me the 3rd generation of the Patrick family to coach the Rangers after Lester, Lynn, and Muzz. Halfway through the season, Espo decided to retire. After 18 seasons, he had played 6 with the Rangers. He finished his career with 717 goals and 1,590 points. Now, the Rangers were in a very, very tough division with the Islanders, Flyers, Flames, and Capitals. And it showed in the standings because Calgary had 92 points, Philly had 97, and Islanders 110. So them only 74 points. No disparaging there. It was a rough go. Now, in the bottom rung, it was tight. Pittsburgh had 73 points. Edmonton had 74. Rangers had 74. Now, if Pittsburgh would have won one more game, they would have played the Kings. Now, the Capitals missed the playoffs by 1 point. Toronto Maple Leafs had 71 as the last seed. Hartford had 60. Colorado had 57. Detroit 56. And the Jets, 957 and 14, 9 points. So they were very, very good at home. Especially in February when he went 5-2-1. Now, just to recap, in the playoffs, as we like to say, playoffs, it was a weird series against the Kings because we really didn't know what to expect because the Kings were a good assemblage of players. Marcel Dion, they had young Larry Murphy, strong team. But the idea about the series, way open. Like you see all the key players, like for the Rangers, Duguay and Greshner and all that. It was just extremely tremendous. So the first salvos of what I call the Rangers rebuild came in that King series. It was all about basically trying to protect the goalies by running as much good offense during the postseason. So here's a breakdown of the Kings Rangers series. It like I said, it was quite interesting. The idea of the fact the cavernous Ranger rink, Madison Square Garden, they had booked a whole bunch of circuses for that week. So when the playoffs started against the Kings, allegedly there was a smell of shit around the rink. And from what I've done for my research, the color commentator for Game 3 was either fired on air or was basically told to shut up because he was making fun of Steve Weeks. Steve Weeks is a very fine gentleman, making fun of his size, and he went on. He made a comment that he's about as thick as two toothpicks. Ha ha ha. Why would you make fun of a goalie? He's in the NHL and he's learning his trade. Now, when the Kings entered the playoffs as the fourth overall seed in the league, they had 99 points, and they're almost the same deception as Montreal. They won the tiebreaker with the Sabres and wins 43-39. Now, the Rangers earned 74 points to get in. Now, the last met in the 79 prelims, where New York defeated the Kings in a 2-game sweep en route to the Stanley Cup final, only lose to Montreal. Now, Rangers won Game 1 in large part due to the impressive goaltending performance of a young Steve Baker, as he turned away 31 of the Kings' 32 shots. Game 2 was marked by a brawl at the end of the first period. 6 players were ejected from the game as a result of it. The Kings won Game 2 5-4 on the strength of Dean Hopkins' goal, 17-16 in the third. However, Game 3 was a blowout, as 8 different players scored in the game for the blue and white. They won 10-3 on home ice, and Weeks again played the third period, and that's where this bullying incident occurred. Game 4 was tied 3-3 in the third until Talon Laidlaw's goal of 6-4-44 gave the Rangers a 4-3 lead. The Rangers added 2 more in the third, earning a series-clinching 6-3 win. Ranger forwards Ron Duguay and Ulf Nielsen each scored a goal in every game in this series. Now, it was big on the Rangers. The Rangers scored in bunches throughout the series, 23 goals in fact. So, in the first contests, Hedberg, Nielsen, Duguay, Baker 31 saves, and Billy Harris, over of course in the Goring trade, scored for the Kings. Now, Mario Lessard, a very competent goalie, although his best days were ahead of him, got the loss, and in Game 2, at the Forum, because he had home ice advantage, it was a 2-2-1, as we say to call it. One of my favorite players to say, Ed Hospodar, scored early to give Rangers a 1-0 lead, but Larry Murphy and Marcel Deon followed. Dave Taylor made it 3-1. Don Duguay, when he's flowing here, scored at 16:44. In the third, Harrison Hopkins scored for the Kings, with Hedberg and Nielsen scoring for the blue and white. Now, Baker made 34 saves, with Mario Lessard saving 23. Now, in Game 3, gets really, really bizarre, ladies and gentlemen. The Rangers gave up 2 goals in the first 3 minutes, Mark Hardy and Dave Taylor, but then Don Maloney, Barry Beck, Ron Greshner, and Eddie Johnstone, a face only a mother could love, made it 4-2 after 1. In the second, Duguay, Johnson again, Dean Talafus, the former King, Ulf Nielsen made it 8-2. Then a young Mike Allison scored. Then Ulf Nielsen again on the power play, and Larry Murphy wrapped it up. Now, Jim Rutherford went in for the third period, a goalie so old that was dust coming off him. Now, in the critical Game 4, Ron Duguay scored early for 1-0 lead for Rangers, but Greg Tanion and the unheralded Lance Nethery made it 2-1, with Dan Bonnar making it 2-2 on a shorthand after 20 minutes. Now, Nielsen scored, Murphy responded, but in the third, it was all Rangers with Laidlaw, Hedberg, and Duguay. Again, Nielsen and Duguay each scored in every contest. And Steve Baker, another great performance again, 24 saves. Mario got the save 42 tough shots, so it was all Rangers. Now, the series against St. Louis was kind of a head scratcher because we didn't know exactly what St. Louis would bring to the table. But we found out early. They won 6-3 in Game 1, where Federico, Sutter, Chapman, Crombeen, Federico Grant, and Mike Zook did it. And Lance Nethery actually scored twice for the Rangers. And Jerry Gillis, Baker took the start. And, of course, Mike Lewitt was still there at the time. Game 2, the Rangers dominated with Beck, Talafus, Jerry Gillis, Hedberg, Mike Allison, Ron Duguay scoring, breaking down the 3-1 lead by St. Louis after first, when Jorgen Pettersson, Larry Patey, and Brian Sutter scored for the Notes. Now, Rangers back at home, they dominated, scoring 10 goals over 2 games. Game 3, Greshner, Nielsen, Beck, Allison against Stevie Vickers, and Lance Nethery, remember that name, scored for the Victors with Wayne Babbage and Bill Stewart for St. Louis. Now, Louis was kind of rough for a second period. Not his fault. He was getting a lot of shots. Now, game 4 was much, much closer. Anders Hedberg and Duguay gave him a 2-0 lead after the first, with Vickers scoring in the second to make it 3-1, and scoring again the double insurance marker. Baker again 33 saves on 34 shots. Now back at the Checker Dome, St. Louis was well valued for 4-3 victory, as Ron Gresher scored early and were ahead at 1 point, 3-1. But then Larry Patey, Jorgen Pettersson, and Pettersson again, a very underrated player, two big goals in the third period. And let's not underestimate the defensive stylings of Larry Patey. He was sort of the Bob Gainey of the squad. He played a big factor. And Louis and Baker again trading great saves in that series. But in the deciding game 6, all Rangers, another 7 goals, leading 3-0 after the first. Vickers, Hedberg, and Duguay. Barry Beck made it 4-0. Then Federico and my distant cousin Rick Lapointe made it 4-2. Then Lance Nethery, remember that name, very underrated, scored his 5th. In the third, Peter Wallin scored, followed by, God bless his soul, Ed Kia at 6 minutes. Then Nielsen getting his 8th of the postseason. Would you believe there was only 25 shots in the whole game, 11 goals? So it wasn't an offensive struggle. But they had really no chance against the Islanders, and losing 5-2, 7-2, 5-1, and 5-2. So the goaltending was the problem here. Steve Baker gave up 5 goals in the first game to Sutter, McEwen, 2 to Tonelli, and 1 to Billy Carroll. The 7-3 loss in game 2, again, you just peppered in the second and third period. Actually, in that contest, ladies and gentlemen, Rangers were leading 3-0 early on goals by Doug Suleiman, Dean Talafus, and Anders Hedberg. But for there, Goring, Bossy, Goring again, Clark Gillies, Anders Galore, and Mike Bossy with his 10th. And Billy Smith only faced 17 shots. Now back in New York, there was no difference. The Islanders take themselves to a 4-0 lead with Bossy, Bourne, Morrow, and Nystrom. Peter Wallin made it 4-1, but then Wayne Merrick, that defensive whiz, made it 5-1. So Baker was starting to feel the long playoff, and unfortunately in game 4, it was all Rangers again. Billy Smith stymied him, and again Islanders started fast with Tonelli and Bossy with 2 to make it 3-0. Butchie Goring shorthanded 129 4-0. Greshner and Beck replied on power play goals, but then Dwayne Sutter had the sword of Damocles to make it 5-2. Now, don't underestimate what that year was for young Baker. He did his best, and not say he was a one-year wonder, but they had young Weeks and young Baker, and it boded well for the future because within a couple of months, not a couple of months, but a couple of years, the Rangers were back in the mix. You could have easily made the final 86, losing to Montreal, and but just I want to show the lineup. I was really impressed with the Rangers lineup that year because I call it a hockey card lineup. There was no player on the team that didn't have fans. It was like a mixture of the old WHA, up and coming players, some veterans. But this lineup, I would take it to the bank any time. If I would had like a Carey Price with his lineup, I could have won the cup. Listen to the names here, ladies and gentlemen: Anders Hedberg, Eddie Johnson, Ron Greshner, Mike Allison, very underrated player, Stevie Vickers, Don Maloney, Dave Maloney, the Maloney brothers, Ulf Nielsen, Ron Duguay, who missed a lot of games but who had 17 goals, the big Barry Beck, Dean Talafus, Tom Laidlaw, Walt Kachuk, like the holdovers Kachuk and Vickers, Dave Silk, the former Olympian, Lance Nethery, very underrated, 11 goals in a regular season, Carol Vadney, again the former SEAL and Montreal Canadian, the very underrated Jerry Gillis. Esposito had 20 points in 41 games and then retired. Ed Hospodar, Chris Kostopoulos, Dick Fautieu, Peter Wallin, Doug Suleiman, Dan McCarthy, Gary Burns, Henri Doré, Cam Connor coming over from Edmonton and Montreal. Mario Marois. Jeff Bandura. Tim Botwell. Mike McDougall. And the goalies, they had... would you believe Steve Weeks only played one game in the regular season but got to play in the playoffs? Dougie Sotart, 39 games. Steve Baker, John Davidson, Wayne Thomas coming over from Montreal and Toronto as well. Now in the postseason, Duguay led all scorers with 17 points. Wolf Nielsen 16, tied with his former WHA line mate. Barry Beck with 13, Greshner with 12, Vickers with 11, Wallin with 8, Lance Nethery with 8, Telefus with 8, Jerry Gillis, Maloney, Laidlaw, Vadney, Allison, and Johnson also scored. The young Chris Christopoulos got a regular turn, 14 games. But Dave Maloney was out most of the series. And Foytu wasn't really a factor. He didn't need any goons because, again, Barry Beckwood took on a lot of it. And in the playoffs, of course, Weeks played 14 minutes with Steve Baker playing the old 826. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm bragging up Steve Baker, and I tell you why. A good goalie from Boston, one of the best goalies to come to the NHL, a double draftee to WHA and the NHL. Now, when he showed up with the Rangers in 1980, he had kind of a mediocre season, 9-8-6. But the 81 season with 10-6-5, he put the whole weight on the team. And ironically, ladies and gentlemen, that's the last time he played in the NHL playoffs. But I think Steve Weeks was a great talent, and he was in the minors for a lot of years. And according to statistics through Internet Hockey Database, of course, the product of Union College, also a product of Owen Sound of the CJCHL. So he played in Canada. He'd struggled to get a winning record. He had a winning record in 81 with the Rangers. But from then on, he never had a winning record. So that magic 81 season was a tremendous for him. Final stats for his career, 20-11, with 3 shutouts. Again, if you wouldn't have played the Islanders in the semifinals, you could have as easily gone to the finals. But the Rangers were an offensive team that year. And again, giving up 4, scoring 4. But if Maloney's would have been better, if Duguay would have been lost all year, if Esposito would have stayed around, I don't know why they convinced him to stay around. He could have maybe bet the Islanders because, they bet the Islanders before with Espo. Ladies and gentlemen, 1981 New York Rangers. But if anyone out there can tell me what the color commentator was in that Game 3 and why there was no Rangers logo at mid-ice. It's a bizarre thing. You're watching the game and say, yeah, it's Madison Square Garden, but where's the beautiful Ranger logo on either side? So, ladies and gentlemen, when we do our hockey podcast, we always say if you have a request, something you'd like to see or talk about, let me know what I like, comment, subscribe, or share. And if you don't agree with me, please leave a respectful comment. But if you're just basically commenting to please yourself, you will be blocked. I want you to say if I'm wrong, the reason why you don't agree. But I think most of the contests were on USA Network at the time, or MSG, what it was called. And like I said, that color commentator, he's very small. First playoff game he ever had, he's being made fun of by the color commentator. So, again, I hope he was fired. And still don't know why Freddie Shero quit because of drinking problems. Couldn't he just go to AA for a while? I got a problem, I'll come back. And, Shero was a great mind. Thanks for listening. As we like to say in the North Shore, keep your stick in the ice. Stanley Cup playoffs on Hockey Night Canada. Wednesday, West Florida takes on the Edmonton Oilers. Keep tuned. Bye.